All right, welcome back, everyone, for another deep dive.
It's great to be here.
Today, we're going to be looking at the book of James,
Okay.
specifically chapter 1 from the King James Version.
All right.
Now, this book, it's really interesting because it's full of, timeless wisdom,
Yeah.
advice that people can still use today, no matter who they are or what they believe.
That's right.
So we're going to be diving into all that, talking about facing challenges, seeking wisdom, and ultimately how to live a fulfilling life.
I think one of the things that really struck me about James is he's not afraid to talk about the difficult things in life.
Yeah.
He acknowledges that trials and tribulations are part of the human experience.
Right.
He actually encourages us to count it all joy when we face those challenges.
That's definitely not the way most people would approach things, right?
No, it goes against our natural instincts.
We tend to avoid pain and problems.
Absolutely.
But James is suggesting that there's something to be gained from these experiences.
There is.
Something that can lead to joy.
Right.
But how does that work?
Well, think about it this way. When you face a challenge and you overcome it, what happens? You build resilience.
Okay.
You discover this inner strength that you might not have even known you had.
Right. You kind of get tougher.
Exactly. And there's actually a growing body of research in psychology.
Oh, interesting.
They call it post-traumatic growth, where studies are showing that people who have gone through really difficult times, they often come out the other side with a greater appreciation for life.
Okay.
Stronger relationships, and a clearer sense of purpose.
So it's not about pretending that the tough times aren't hard.
No, not at all.
It's about seeing the potential, the good that can come from it.
Absolutely. It's about the growth that can emerge from those challenges.
It almost reminds me of that Japanese art, kintsugi,
I've heard of that.
where they repair broken pottery with gold.
Right, they make the cracks beautiful.
Yeah, so the brokenness becomes part of the object's beauty.
Joy.
And maybe that's what James is suggesting, that we can do the same thing with our own lives,
Yeah.
seeing those imperfections, those scars, as part of what makes us whole.
That's a beautiful analogy.
And it also highlights something else that James talks about. Patience.
Yes, patience.
He says, let patience have her perfect work. Which, let's be honest, that's a tough one these days.
It is, especially in our culture of instant gratification.
Exactly. We want everything now.
Right.
Fast and easy and waiting. Ugh, that's like the worst.
It's almost seen as a weakness.
Yeah, or a waste of time.
But James doesn't see it that way.
No, he definitely doesn't.
He presents it as a virtue, something worth cultivating.
So how does he convince us of that?
Well, he uses this really powerful analogy of a farmer waiting for the harvest.
Okay, I'm listening.
Just like a farmer can't rush the crops.
You can't speed up nature.
Exactly. We can't force the unfolding of our own lives either.
Right.
There's a natural process of growth and development, and that process requires time, persistence, and trust.
It's like trying to bake a cake.
Yes.
You can't just crank up the oven and expect it to be done in 5 minutes.
It's exactly. You'll end up with a mess.
So patience isn't just about, sitting around and waiting.
It's not passive.
It's about actively participating in the process.
Yeah.
Trusting that things will work out in their own time.
That's a great way to put it.
And that takes a certain amount of, faith.
It does.
Not necessarily in the religious sense, but faith in the process itself.
Yeah, faith in your own abilities.
And speaking of faith, James also talks about wisdom.
Yes, he says that God generously gives wisdom to those who ask for it.
But what exactly is wisdom?
Right, it's a good question.
You could be super knowledgeable, even brilliant,
Sure.
but still lack wisdom.
Absolutely.
So how is it different?
It's not about how much you know.
Okay.
It's about how you apply that knowledge. Wisdom is about discernment, understanding the deeper meaning and consequences of your choices.
So it's not just about being smart. It's about being good.
I like that, yeah.
Making decisions that reflect your character.
Exactly, and your understanding of what really matters in life.
It makes you think about how you personally make decisions,
It does.
Do you just rely on logic and facts? Or is there something more to it?
Right, do you consider your values, your intuition, maybe even a sense of something bigger than yourself?
Now, there's something else that James warns us about.
What's that?
Being double-minded.
Interesting.
He says it's like being unstable in all your ways.
Well, that doesn't sound good.
No, it doesn't.
What's the danger there?
It's about inconsistency and indecision.
Ah, I see.
When you're double-minded, You're always second-guessing yourself, going back and forth. You're
Yeah.
easily swayed by other people's opinions.
Right.
And you can't commit to anything.
It's like being pulled in two different directions at once.
Exactly.
And you end up feeling stuck.
And we see this all the time in modern life, right?
Oh, absolutely.
People constantly changing careers,
Yeah.
having trouble with commitment in relationships, feeling overwhelmed by all the choices they have to make.
Like they're paralyzed by indecision.
Exactly. So James is saying that real stability, real growth comes from making a decision and sticking to it,
It's about aligning your actions with your values and commitments.
even when doubts creep in.
Yes, even when things get tough.
It's about having that inner compass, that sense of direction.
That guides you through the complexities of life.
And speaking of things that can complicate our lives, let's talk about wealth.
All right?
James has some pretty strong words about that.
He does.
He compares rich people to a flower of the grass
Okay.
that withers away quickly.
So what's the message there?
He's not saying that being wealthy is bad in itself,
No, I don't think so.
but he's warning us against putting too much emphasis on material possessions, because chasing wealth for its own sake, it can become a trap,
Yeah, you get caught up in the pursuit of more and more.
and you lose sight of what really matters.
Exactly, those deeper, more meaningful things in life.
So he's reminding us that wealth, it's fleeting, it's temporary,
It comes and goes.
and when you make it your top priority, you risk losing sight of things like relationships, purpose, compassion, even connection to something bigger than yourself,
It's about recognizing that true wealth lies in those intangible things.
like love, kindness, generosity.
Creativity, connection to nature, the pursuit of meaning.
So James is basically challenging us to reevaluate our priorities.
To ask ourselves, what are we truly investing in?
Right. Are we sacrificing the truly valuable things for the sake of, money and stuff?
It's a question worth pondering.
Because if wealth is fleeting, then what are the things that actually deserve our time and energy? What are the things that will bring us lasting joy and fulfillment?
Those are the questions that can guide us towards a life of purpose, a life that goes beyond just material possessions.
And that brings us to another big human struggle.
What's that?
Temptation.
Ah, yes, temptation.
James says that every man is tempted when he's drawn away by his own desires.
So where does temptation come from?
Is it from outside forces? Peer pressure?
Not necessarily.
James is pointing to something deeper,
He's highlighting the fact that temptation often arises from within.
from our own desires and appetites.
Right, those inner poles that can lead us astray.
So it's not just about external factors,
It's about those internal triggers.
those cravings that can easily lead us down a path we don't really want to take.
It's like the sirens in Greek mythology, you know?
Those beautiful creatures who lured sailors to their deaths with their enchanting songs.
Yes, they were irresistible.
We all have our own sirens in a way,
Those tempting voices that promise pleasure or satisfaction.
but they can lead to ruin if we're not careful.
It's a powerful image.
And it highlights the importance of self-awareness
Absolutely.
and self-control,
Right, recognizing those desires and choosing wisely.
because we do have a choice.
Yes, we're not helpless victims of our desires.
We have the power to say no to temptation.
To choose a different path.
It seems like this idea of choice and personal responsibility is a big part of James's message.
It is. He's not giving us a set of rules to follow blindly.
He's inviting us to participate in our own transformation
To take ownership of our choices and shape our lives.
in a way that aligns with our values.
And that leads to another powerful statement in this chapter.
What's that?
He says, "Sin, when it is finished, bringeth forth death."
Whoa, that's intense.
It is. It raises some questions.
Like, what does he mean by death here?
Right. Is he talking about physical death?
I don't think so.
It's more about a spiritual or emotional death.
Okay.
A loss of vitality, purpose, and connection.
So when we consistently make choices that go against our values, we damage our sense of integrity, our relationships.
We create a distance between ourselves and what we hold sacred.
It's like we're slowly chipping away at our own well-being.
Yes. Creating an emptiness inside.
And you can try to fill that void with outward success.
With material possessions, achievements.
But it doesn't really work, does it?
It doesn't address the root of the problem.
So James is telling us to be mindful of our choices
To choose actions that nourish our souls.
rather than deplete them,
That's a great way to put it.
and choose the path that leads to true flourishing.
Both for ourselves and for the world around us.
Wow, we've covered a lot of ground already.
We have, but there's still more to explore.
We've talked about joy in trials, patience, wisdom, double-mindedness, wealth, temptation.
It's all connected, isn't it?
It is, and it all points to living a life of meaning and purpose.
And James has more to say about that in the rest of the chapter.
He does, so stay tuned for part 2 of our deep dive into James chapter 1.
We'll be back soon with more insights and wisdom from this timeless book.
Can't wait to share it with you all.
Me neither.
Welcome back. So in the last part, we were talking about how temptation can lead us down the wrong path,
Mm-hmm.
But James, he doesn't just leave us hanging with a warning.
Right.
He gives us a pretty powerful antidote, action. He actually says, "Be ye doers of the word, and not hearers only, deceiving your own selves."
Powerful words.
Yeah, so what do you think he means by that?
Well, this whole idea of being a doer instead of just a hearer, it's a big deal in James, It's all about connecting knowledge with action.
Yeah, bridging that gap. Because it's so easy to fall into the trap of thinking that just knowing something is enough, right?
It is.
We read books, listen to podcasts, go to lectures, but then, life happens and we never really put any of it into practice.
Exactly. And James actually compares someone who just listens but doesn't act to someone who looks at their reflection in a mirror and then, immediately forgets what they look like.
Oh, wow.
It's just a fleeting glance, doesn't change anything.
So how do we avoid becoming that person? How do we actually, take what we learn and make it part of who we are?
It really starts with intention. We have to be willing to ask ourselves, how can I use this in my life? What specific steps can I take to live this out?
It's got to be more than just mental agreement, right?
Absolutely. You have to do something with the insights, not just nod your head and move on.
It sounds like it takes a bit of honesty, too.
Yeah.
Like looking at ourselves and being real about where we're falling short.
Right, where we're all talk and no action.
And then having the courage to actually change, to take action, even when it's hard.
That's the key. That's where the growth happens.
Yeah. Now, James also talks about pure religion.
Right.
He says, pure religion and undefiled before God and the Father is this: to visit the fatherless and widows in their affliction, and to keep himself unspotted from the world.
Mm-hmm.
What I find so striking about that is that it's not just about personal piety. It's about how we act in the world,
It really challenges that idea that faith is just a private thing.
Mm-hmm.
James is saying that real faith, it shows up in how we treat other people, especially those who are hurting.
It's putting our beliefs into action, showing compassion, helping others.
Exactly.
And realizing that we're all connected.
Right. We're not isolated individuals. We're a part of a community.
So how does this idea of pure religion translate to today,
Yeah.
What are some ways we can live this out in our everyday lives?
Well, I think there are so many ways, big and small.
Yeah.
Like volunteering at a local charity, donating to organizations that help people in need, speaking out against injustice, advocating for change, or even just showing kindness in your daily interactions.
It's about paying attention to the people around you.
Yes. And finding ways to make your community a better place.
Because even the smallest acts of kindness can make a difference, right?
Absolutely. They can have a ripple effect.
This whole idea of pure religion, it's both beautiful and, honestly, a bit challenging.
It is. It pushes us to live out our faith.
Yeah. To let it shape not just what we believe, but, who we are and how we treat other people.
It's about aligning our actions with our values.
So far in this deep dive, we've gone over a lot. Finding joy in trials, patience, wisdom, double-mindedness, wealth, temptation, hearing versus doing, and now pure religion. It's a lot to unpack.
It is, but it all fits together, doesn't it?
It does. And James has even more wisdom to share.
Oh, definitely.
In the next part, we're going to be looking at the connection between our words and our actions.
Interesting.
James has some really important things to say about that.
Yeah, like how to speak with wisdom and avoid the traps of anger and careless speech.
Which, let's be real, that's something we all struggle with sometime.
It's a message that's so relevant for today's world.
It is. So make sure to stick around for part 3, where we'll uncover even more from the book of James. All right, so we're back for the final part of our deep dive into James chapter 1.
It's been a fascinating journey.
It has.
Yeah.
And as we wrap things up, James leaves us with some advice that feels, particularly relevant today. He says, "Wherefore, my beloved brethren, let every man be swift to hear, slow to speak, slow to wrath." Why do you think he stresses that, being slow to speak and slow to wrath?
Well, our words, they have so much power, don't they?
They really do.
Think about it. They can build people up, tear them down.
Inspire or discourage.
Create connections or, cause division.
And these days, it's like everything moves so fast.
Right. Everything's instant.
We fire off emails and texts, post on social media, often without really thinking about the impact.
We react impulsively.
Yeah, we get caught up in arguments and debates.
Let our emotions take over.
But James is telling us to slow down,
To pause, take a breath.
choose our words carefully.
Because they're not just empty sounds.
Wow.
They have consequences, real consequences.
They can ripple out and affect so much more than just ourselves.
Absolutely. Relationships, communities, even society as a whole.
So it's not about suppressing our feelings or anything.
No, not at all.
It's more about being aware,
Cultivating restraint.
recognizing that our words can heal,
Or harm.
and choosing to use them for good.
You align them with our values.
That's not always easy, is it?
It's not, especially when it seems like everyone's always rushing to have their say.
Yeah, the loudest voice wins.
But true wisdom, I think, lies in that ability to pause.
To think before you speak.
And to choose your words carefully.
It's about being mindful, not just about avoiding anger or hurtful words.
But really cultivating a more thoughtful approach.
Yeah, in all our interactions.
Listening attentively, seeking understanding.
Speaking with empathy and respect.
Even when we disagree.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into James, what are some of the key takeaways you'd like listeners to remember?
Well, I think the main thing is that wisdom, it's not just about having knowledge.
It's about what you do with it.
Exactly. It's about using that knowledge to grow, to find purpose, to live a fulfilling life.
To develop those virtues we talked about. Patience, resilience, compassion, integrity.
And recognizing that every choice we make, big or small, it shapes our lives.
And the world around us.
It all comes back to living a life that reflects our deepest values.
A life that contributes to something bigger than ourselves.
Absolutely.
Well, that about wraps up our deep dive into James chapter 1.
It's been a pleasure exploring this with you.
Likewise, we hope you found it insightful, maybe even inspiring.
And that it encourages you to continue your own journey of discovery.
Because the wisdom in these ancient texts, it's timeless.
It really is. It offers guidance and encouragement for anyone seeking a more meaningful life.
So keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep striving to live out these principles.
In your own unique way.
Until next time, keep diving deep.
And remember, the journey's just beginning.
We'll see you on the next deep dive.